All right. Hi, everyone. I don't know if I need this mic. Hello. Hi, everybody. So I'm speaking into this mic because we are recording this session and it only records what I say if I talk into the microphone. So I know this is a small enough room for you to hear me, I'm sure otherwise. So good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to this first of, I guess, in-person consultation following along 2 years of virtual meetings. So it's really great to see so many people out here tonight. Thank you so much for coming. This will be a 1-hour session, and immediately following is tonight's council meeting. So we do have to wrap up right at 7 o'clock. I'm Jacqueline Demers. I'm an account manager with Red Brick Communications. So we're a small communications firm based out of Mississauga, and which is a Toronto suburb, if people aren't aware. It's the one right west of Toronto, our claim to fame. So anyways, Red Brick provides lots of communication support to municipal governments across Ontario, things like facilitating public meetings and communications planning, training, and things like that. So I'm excited to be here tonight to facilitate this meeting. And I think you have a great opportunity here to help shape the future of your community by providing input onto the future of 51 Dunlop Street. So let's just get right into it since we've only got an hour, and I'll just introduce the staff from Penetanguishene that are here with me tonight. So we have your CAO, Jeff Lees. Stacey Cooper, the town clerk, is at that back table over there. And next to Stacey is a microphone that we'll ask that you use following my presentation if you'd like to give feedback or comments, or if you have any questions, just so that it is recorded. If it's a simple question and you don't want to go to the back to speak to the mic, you can just ask the question. Stacey will repeat it so that it's recorded and makes it into our final video. We also have Andrea Betty, the Director of Planning and Community Development, and is Owen Taylor here, also a planner, and Sarah Marshall at the back table over there, who's going to be operating my slide deck, and she is the Communications and Technology Coordinator. Okay, so again, I'm going to begin with a short presentation. It probably won't even take 20 minutes. That'll take us through the background on how we got to where we are today, just frame the opportunity of what we're actually trying to decide at this point in time. I'll lay out the different options that we have on the table to consider, and then talk a little bit about next steps. And then we'll move into the public input portion where you can provide feedback, ask questions, or just give comments, and then a quick wrap up at the end. So you probably noticed when you walked in that there are 6 poster boards that have the different options on them for future use. And we have a little activity at the end that will allow you to vote on those poster boards with colored Post-it notes to rank from your first to last choice. It's not a mandatory exercise, but if you would like to vote, please do so. And I imagine many of you have already voted online, probably. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so you can also give your feedback and vote online at connectpenetanguishene.ca, and that is open until August 15th, I believe, so until Monday. And the next one. Okay, so again, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to gather public input on the options for the future use of the vacant land that's at 51 Dunlop Street. You can provide your feedback online as well. So there are many options for future use of this land and within some parameters. So at the stage that we're at right now, we're looking for feedback and ideas. And following this meeting, staff will put together a report based on what we hear tonight and the results of the online consultation, and they'll present those findings to council likely in the fall. And then council will determine the next steps. So just a little bit of background, as I'm sure you're aware, in 2021, Penetanguishene purchased land at 51 Dunlop Street. It's a 13-acre property. It was the former site of the Penetanguishene Secondary School. And following the community closure program, where residents had a chance to say goodbye to the former school building that was not in great shape, as I'm sure you're aware, the land is now vacant, and we're at a spot right now where we're ready to plan for its future use. So the vacant site offers good road access. It's close to existing residential areas, as well as close to where future residential and commercial development is expected. So throughout the whole process, not just tonight, but throughout the whole process of determining what is going to be built, if anything, at 51 Dunlop, public input is going to play an important role on what council decides and how we move forward. So what's our opportunity? So this is just meant to frame our overall discussion tonight. So the opportunity here is that the town of Penetanguishene will determine the future of the 13-acre vacant property located at 51 Dunlop. The property is centrally located with many possibilities for future use that can meet the community's needs now and in the future. Basically, we've got lots of options. And one important thing to point out is that we've got a lot of existing work to help guide our decision. We're not starting from scratch here. And so one of those things is the strategic plan, and the strategic plan itself was developed with community input already. So it's a document that should really be our key guide for the decision on what happens to 51 Dunlop. So whatever our choice, the choice ends up being, or the next steps end up being, they should align with the goals set out in the strategic plan. So those include economic goals, employment, ensuring that the town has diverse and plentiful employment options. Recreation, Penetanguishene will enjoy modern and accessible opportunities for sport, fitness, and recreational activities. Attainable housing, so Penetanguishene will contain a greater supply and diversity of housing stock while maintaining its current small town feel, and also responsible finance, so public funds and assets will be responsibly managed. And again, the strategic plan was developed with input from the community and is obviously available on the website if you would like to review it, and that's what it looks like right there. So another guide we have is existing zoning. So this property as it is today is zoned as a neighborhood area, and that's determined in the official plan. The official plan is the overarching tool that helps us direct future growth and also was developed with input from the community. I suspect many of you have probably not read the entire official plan. It's quite a long document, but in any case, a neighborhood area, which is the current zoning, the permitted uses are residential use. So that's low and medium residential. So if we're thinking about something like a high-rise building, that would require a change in zoning. Neighborhood commercial use, so low density commercial, so things like convenience stores, hair salons, small restaurants, stuff like that. Community facilities, which is quite a broad category, includes healthcare, schools, recreation facilities, cultural facilities, things like that. Parks and open spaces, and neighborhood areas should also encourage pedestrian access. And so the options that we set out in the May council report, they all align with the permitted uses for the neighborhood area, which is the existing zoning. That's not to say that the land could not be rezoned, but that would be a separate process that would have to happen in the future. So a little bit more about that report from May 2022, which you can also find on the website. So staff delivered a report to council outlining several options for the future use of 51 Dunlop. And a really important point here is that before any development actually happens, the town has to do quite a bit more work. So they would have to come up with a detailed secondary plan, and that would have to be supported by various studies. So those studies could include things like a transportation impact assessment, market analysis, urban design guidelines, and overall community design plans. And another really important point that is going to make our work a little bit more challenging than it may be otherwise is that we don't yet have detailed costing or financial implications for each of these options. To get to a point where we have a really detailed plan where we can say option B is going to cost this much money over this amount of time, a lot more work has to happen. So our goal here tonight really is to gather, sort of put our pulse on the finger of where, or put our finger on the pulse, sorry, of where the community is at right now. Where are people leaning? We've got so many different options. Are most people looking for more recreation opportunities in the community? Are people looking for more health and community facilities? If there are a few options that stick out, then let's say, can't say for sure, but that would be likely then where council decides to investigate further. and we would have more information at that point. So when you're looking at all these different options, it's really about what you envision the future of the community to be for yourself today and for future generations. So we're asking you to weigh each option as if they were financially equal, which is a bit of a challenge because we don't have real numbers to play with right now. It's also important to consider that the site is next to undeveloped land, and that land is earmarked for employment growth in the future. So we should think about options that would be compatible with a future commercial development next to 51 Dunlop. Okay, so now we'll get into each of the options. And an important thing here is the list of, or the information that's included for each of the options. It's not necessarily pros or cons or good things or bad things. It's really just a summary of the information that we have now. Specifically on the multi-use recreation center, there is quite a bit more information available through the arena and recreation study. We know that public input completed through the arena and recreation study demonstrated that people preferred building a new recreation center over some of the other options. The arena study identified 51 Dunlop itself as the preferred location for a new multi-use facility, and that's due to its proximity to existing residential areas and land where future development is expected. Building a new rec center will also help replace existing aging facilities and expand recreational programs for the community. So a housing development. So as I talked about earlier, so in the strategic plan, one of the town's top priorities is to encourage more attainable housing, and that includes affordable rental units. As a neighborhood area, it currently zoned as its current zoning as a neighborhood area permits low and medium density residential. So again, if a high density residential building was to be considered, the site may need to be rezoned, and there would be other development approvals to consider. So one other piece of information to do with housing development is that the county of Simcoe they have the responsibility to plan, manage, and fund social housing in the county. So it could be challenging for Penetanguishene, the town, to ensure that the community's wishes for a certain, say, percentage of affordable or attainable housing is included there. So that's something to consider as well. And any housing site would also, again, need to be compatible with the future employment lands that are set to be developed next to this property. Health and community facilities. So that's a really broad option that it could include things like health clinics, treatment facilities, government facilities, childcare centers, museums, or other cultural facilities that meet the community's needs. So it's quite open-ended. And again, depending on the scale of what was proposed, again, that could require rezoning and further investigation into development. So the site is large enough to consider a variety of health and community facilities. It's, again, close to existing residential development and future development. It is outside of the downtown core area, and that's where existing businesses and services are located. So another thing to consider. So future school site. So there's the option of the town partnering with a local school board for a potential combination use of the property. 51 Dunlop, obviously we know it's the site of the former Penetanguishene Secondary School. It is large, it's vacant, and it is already serviced to be a school. So the future school site, it's permitted under the official plan, and it wouldn't require any changes to zoning. And we also know that there have been community members that have expressed interest in the town partnering with a local school board to build a new school site at that property. So a really open-ended option is a combination of uses. The town could opt to combine all the previous uses, or a couple of them, or 2 or 3. And this would enable certainly a more creative approach, but a challenge would be the town would need to decide how to divide the land use and then determine the best process for development approvals if there would need to be rezoning and other considerations as well. And then lastly, probably the most unexciting option is to retain for future needs. So that's exactly what it sounds like. Nothing would happen to the land. The town would keep it and make a decision at some time in the future if a different need was identified. So the land would just continue to sit vacant, and it would not benefit the community in any way right now. But then we don't have to make a decision right now. So some of the benefits to the community of developing the land, thinking about developing the land now, could be boosting tourism, economic development, planning for growth, improving opportunities for residents, and things like that. Okay, so our decision. So what are we actually deciding tonight? So we're looking for feedback and ideas on how the town of Penetanguishene can use the vacant land at 51 Dunlop to meet the community's needs now and in the future in a way that aligns with the town's existing plans. And our next steps. So our next step tonight really is to hear from you and also to complete our poster board activity, which I'll talk about in just a second. But a timeline for what's happening now and what has happened is, in 2021, we purchased the school or the land that had the school on it. Then there was the community closure program. And where we are right now is in the top right-hand corner. We're completing some community consultation on sort of where people are headed or where people are leaning on what they think would be the best use of this land in the future. Next step would be that the staff, Penetanguishene staff, creates a report and delivers that to council. We expect that to happen in the fall of this year. And then council will determine next steps and will communicate those back to the community. So input and poster board activity. So we're happy again to take your feedback, questions, and comments. And if you would like to go up to the mic and speak, that is great because we can record it. If it's a simple question, I think Stacy's happy to just repeat it into the mic so you don't have to get up. The poster board activity, we've got little packages of Post-it notes at the back there with Sarah. So either now or on your way out, if you take the package of Post-it notes and they are color coded based on your most liked option to least liked option. So 6 would be your least preferred, 1 is most preferred. If you're having any trouble deciphering the different colors, I'm happy to help and take you to each of the poster boards. But the sticky notes are just going to be our sort of live and in-person voting. And again, you can also vote online at connectpenetanguishene.ca. So that's the end of my presentation. We've reached the question portion and feedback portion, and happy to hear from you. Sure, go ahead. Yeah, if it's a comment, I think it's probably.
So my first question is, because it's not defined, is it says a school board, but it doesn't say which school board. Can you speak to that tonight?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we're at the point of having those details. It would have to be the community saying strongly, we think a school is the best thing to go there. And then staff would have to take the next step and look at what actual options exist for a school.
Okay. From a parent's point of view and a taxpayer of this town, we've had multiple discussions regarding one particular school board that is in desperate need of a new school. So I think for us as the parents of that school would be really important moving forward to know if that's the school that's being considered, because we can't speak to that further if we don't know which school board it is. If it's a school board that does not affect that school, then that's a totally different discussion for us. So I think, although I understand what you're saying, and I completely get that you're not at that point, I think moving forward is extremely important for the chunk of the community that affects directly to know if that's the school that's being considered or not, because that would be a completely different discussion for me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're considering any one school board in particular at this point, but I think what would be helpful for us is, like, I know what school board you're talking about and you know what school board you're talking about, but if you tell us, and that's included as part of our as part of the feedback we get from the community, that I'm a parent at this school and this is my vision for the future of this land is to have this school board partner with the community.
Okay, so for the record, I'm speaking about Burkeville School. Just very quickly, Burkeville School did have discussions with Simcoe County District School Board in 2020 or 21 regarding purchasing that land. That was a done deal until the Ministry of Education decided to cancel that deal. And then it went into, I guess, open for whoever to purchase. So I think that's really important to know that. I think it's also important to know that that school is busting at the seams. Obviously, I have a child that goes there, and I think that his education is extremely important. And I think that his opportunities are important. And although I know the popular decision is a community center, I also know that the children of that school and every other school, don't get me wrong, is the future of this town. So when all of us are no longer worrying about a rec center, they will be the ones benefiting from whatever we put in that location.
Yep.
So I want to make that very clear that it is Burkeville, and I think it's extremely important to really consider that school, because there's a lot of other elementary schools in this town that are not busting at the seams, and they have a lot of space right now. My other question or comment would be, in your presentation, you talked about how that land is already set up for a school. So I think that that's really important to note as well, that talking about cost and cost effectiveness, I'm assuming that it would cost less to set up a school if it's already set for that and already ready for a school to be built on that property. So I just wanted to make a comment about that. The housing that we're potentially discussing, I would assume that having affordable housing would be a better decision to have it closer to main amenities, not further out of town. So I would hope that would also be considered when looking into that option. I did have another. Oh, you referred a couple times to the property next to what you're speaking of, and you kept referring to commercial and future development. Can you speak to that, or can anyone comment on that, what that looks like? Because I think that also helps with the discussion. Sorry?
So thank you very much for your comment. So there are actually 2 land use designations in our official plan that surround that property. So directly to the east of it is employment lands, which are typically industrial land uses. So those lands go all the way from behind the existing school at St. Anne's and 51 Dunlop over through Thompson Road as it extends up to Robert Street and all the way over to Robert Street. And it's right down to the curve on Thompson Road. So anything south of 51 Dunlop is in a neighborhood residential area. And so that would be the residential uses. So there is a combination of both residential and employment land uses. Employment land uses can be fairly broad. Typically, we try and suggest they're employment generating, so manufacturing, industrial type uses. But there is that compatibility matter that we need to really carefully consider to make sure that the more heavy industrial uses that may occur there are not going to cause any negative impacts to the schools, the institutions, or those residents. So there is a bit of a buffer area that we would need to consider and build into the development of the site.
Okay, thank you. Because as a resident who lives literally across the road from that land, it's a twofold for me as far as education goes and what will affect my personal property. So I do have a dual kind of interest in that. So I think that that's moving forward. More detailed information would be very helpful as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Did you have a comment too, Stacey?
I just wanted to mention with the sticky notes, when you're voting for just under that context, if there's something specific you want to say, you could write it on the sticky note. If this is your first vote and you want to write Burkeville, let's say, you can write that on the sticky note so that we have a comment that goes with the vote.
All right.
That was my grand entrance. Clearly, the magnitude of whatever happens to 51 Dunlop is huge. It's the biggest deal that's happened in this town for a long, long time. Bigger than the reconstruction of Main Street and the town dock and all of that combined. So having said that, I think these public forums of 25 community members coming out is clearly helpful. I think things like online surveys are helpful, but that isn't even scratching the surface in terms of the 10,000 people that will be forever impacted by whatever decision is made going forward. So to a guy who failed grade 3, my question is, given the magnitude of this project, has any consideration been given to putting this on the upcoming ballot as a referendum? If we've narrowed this down to 5 or 6 choices, that would clearly bring it to the attention and everybody who votes would have the opportunity to weigh in on that. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I certainly wasn't expecting this question, but I think I'm the person to answer it. So as per the Municipal Elections Act, there's a time frame that council can decide to add a question to the ballot, and that time frame has passed. So it's not an opportunity on this current municipal election ballot.
Thanks, Stacey.
I was just asked what the deadline was. If I had that in my head, I would love it. I would look so smart right now. I don't remember. I think April
Okay.
would have been the deadline.
Yeah, and I think it's important also, even if we did at this stage have something like a referendum, there's no concrete decision being made today.
I have a question. How do you turn this on? Okay. My question relates to accessing the property. So currently, being a former PSS student, you can go up Edward and what's the other street? So you've got those two, yeah, off of Robert. And so is there another means of accessing that property? Because, let's say hypothetically, you put a rec center there. Well, you're going to have people with kids in swimming lessons bombing down those streets, those residential streets, every hour when a class starts and ends. And so just think about that. I mean, that's another factor to consider. How are you going to get there to whatever is there? You have to get to it. And how has any thought been given, or is there anything in the plan in terms of accessing that property via another method? Yes, thank you, Thompson. Yeah, that's all.
I'll let someone else answer that.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So great question. So right now there are 3 public road allowances that are surround that property. So there is Dunlop Street, Edward Street, and Gautier Drive on the north side. But those properties surrounding that I spoke about, the employment lands and the residential lands, those are subject to a future development approval. And so one of the things that we do when we consider development is we take a look at traffic volumes and where best improvements to roads need to be or intersections need to be, as well as the provision of new roads. So we don't have any idea of what's going to happen around it. That might be something that comes, 5, 10, 20 years down the road. But I would suggest that, whatever use goes into that property, one of the first studies or one of the studies that will need to be done is the traffic review. And that'll be based on trips on the land use. So a recreation center has different trip generation than a housing development would have. Secondly, to that, when that lands come around surrounding it online for development opportunities, they have to prepare their own traffic impact study. And so then we will take a look at what those additional traffic volumes would do for the road networks and make improvements or suggestions on new roads. So, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball to see into the future, but I'm going to suggest that, those 3 existing roads, they're fairly well used. They're probably can accept the volumes that would be generated for this. It will be the surrounding development that will likely require more new roads coming in and more access to Thompson Road, I would guess. Thompson Road is one of our collector roads that is supposed to be a high volume of traffic. And so I would see that those roads would somehow be connected to this site. No, we don't have any development applications for those lands to know what they would look like. And if and when we do get those development plans, it is subject to a public consultation process, and it is subject to those reports and studies.
Hi, I guess I'm going to be the only one that says this. I would like a rec center for the young and the old, because I'm not that old, but I'm not that young. To have to drive to Midland to go and play badminton, like in the wintertime or things like that. Plus, we have to keep this community going. If we don't have young people in this community and their kids and have things for them to do, they're not going to move here. They're going to weigh their options and they'll move to Midland or other areas. Another question is, when we tear down the okay, if we do move everything up there, we tear down the arena, why can't affordable housing go there? It's close to all the amenities. People can walk. There's already affordable housing around there. And the people, and there's a lot of them are seniors, walk downtown, right? And the other thing is, why couldn't Burkevale School buy the old Pantang Hospital property and build a school there, which is close to downtown, has plenty of parking, and would be a great area. And there's plenty of property there. I don't know. I might be the black sheep in the, and I know, and I hear Burkevale and they need a new school and it's bursting at the seams, and I feel for them. Just like St. Anne's was when my son started, and there was like, I don't know how many portables. Now it's not as busy. So, and our community is growing. We're building on Fuller, on Fox, and off of Thompson. So we're building, and we need something for our community, our kids, our seniors, everybody to do, instead of having to drive to Midland. And Midland's not going to be able to have the capacity to accept everybody from Penetang either. So I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for your comments.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I'll join your black sheep. But I don't think you are. My concern would be, and I agree with Burkevale, and I agree everything that you said. I think they're very, very valid points. I'm all for a rec center, including various, the ice rink, a swimming pool, every other activity that keeps us in Penetang. It's not just going to Midland to do badminton. It's afterwards, you're going to go and eat at a Midland restaurant. And that's where we lose people. We don't have the facilities in Penetang currently to keep people here. So yes, if we have a rec center here, people aren't going to drive to Midland to go to Kelsey's. But after the Y, if you're going to the Y, or you're going to whether activities you're doing in Midland, you're going to stay in Midland. You're not going to, and we need to keep people in Penetang. I mean, that gives us a whole different issue of what we need to keep them here. But at least if they come here to do their sports, they're not going to go and frequent the restaurants in Midland, because we can't afford to lose those people. We have to support our own restaurants and keep our own businesses going. So I'm with you on a multi-recreational functional center. Thank you. And your points were so good about the facilities. If we lose the arena and the old hospital, great points.
Gentleman behind you.
Clearly, the community members are very passionate about this issue. Not probably. I deeply believe more passionate than anything that we've encountered in the last 20 years and maybe the next 20 years. This is huge. So my referendum isn't going to fly. I'm okay with that. But I really reach out to the council and ask them to be creative and find a way to truly engage with every taxpayer, every community member. If we can mail out a water bill, we can mail out which of the 6 do you want. Thanks.
Hi. Just letting you know that my wife and I are very proud to be new Penetang folk, having moved here in December, and absolutely love the town and the people and the staff involved with the town. And one of the things that we chatted about was the multi-use recreation center. And I think really the idea of an arena is nice, but it's limited in its use, if you think about it. Whereas a pool, as an example, can be used all the time. It can be used for aquafit. It can be used for water polo. It can be used for links, family swims, all sorts of things. A rec center can also have a gymnasium. So adults, kids can come in, do pickup basketball, racquetball, volleyball. Again, you can have ad hoc teams that show up. There'd be meeting rooms, there'd be consensus rooms, there'd be craft rooms. One thought that's been running around in my head to think about is combining that with a school. So that you could actually have a school that has an attached recreation center. And we come from a municipality down south, not a suburb of Toronto, that did have high schools with combined rec centers attached. And that way, both the schools had a chance to use them and the community had a chance to use them. So there are things that can be thought about as well. And I think one of the things, to your point, is this is going to take a while to plan. And it is going to take a while to get staff to put all these ideas together, present something to council. Council, of course, you're listening to what people are saying, but it's still going to be a year or so or more. It still allows for either a mail out to everybody or a separate referendum. I know these things cost money, but at the same time, if we're going to be spending multi-millions for some sort of a facility, then it also is, as it said, we want all the taxpayers to have a chance to say something. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just want to be clear that I am not opposed to a rec center. That was not my position. I agree that it would be great if the land could be used for some type of rec center and a school. I am not opposed to that. I think that that would be fantastic because I agree it's not just about one group of people. There's thousands of people in the town. So I agree with the last couple of comments that it would be fantastic if it could be a combined effort. To the comments about having to go to Midland, students at Burkeville have to be bused into the YMCA to use a gym. The last couple of years, the gym was used for grade 7 and 8 classes. My son this year was stuck in a room beside the gym to do reading. He's in grade 1 while a gym class is going on. It's just not working. So please keep that in mind and know that the parents of that school are not closed-minded, that we think it's just all about us. That's not the case. I'm just looking for something that works for the students so that they have opportunities as well. So I am all for both. I had a question about, there's land on Robert Street that there were signs up about affordable housing. It was like that V section. I don't know what's going on with that, but my understanding was that was supposed to be affordable housing. So my question is that still ongoing and what's happening with that?
So I hope I have the right property. I'm assuming you're saying the property that's on Robert Street East that's bounded by LaCaron Avenue and Burke Street.
Yes.
So that is a plan of subdivision that was an application that was appealed and is in front of the Ontario Land Tribunal for a decision to upcoming. So that's currently sort of being debated in the court systems. That wasn't necessarily affordable housing.
Okay.
Wasn't targeted around what most people would believe is affordable housing. It was just a market housing project that combined both townhouses, both freehold and rental.
Okay. My other comment is about wanting to keep young people in the town. I 100% agree, but coming from a generation that I grew up here, what keeps people in this town are jobs and good paying jobs. Because although rec centers are great, and yes, they do bring in jobs, you have to have jobs that pay enough that people can afford to live here, to buy homes, to invest back into the community. So it's not just about, building a rec center and it's going to keep all the young people here. The people that grow up here, go away to university, college, whatever it may be, they want to come back if there's jobs that are available to come back to. So I think that's a whole nother discussion, but I think it's important to note that. And then the other thing is, if it is a rec center, we also have to consider what the cost is to the programs that are going to be run at the rec center. Because if the costs are astronomical in order to run the facility, then a lot of people that live here won't be able to afford those programs. So I think that also needs to be considered. So if we want everyone in the community to access a rec center, then it has to be affordable enough for all generations and all income levels to be able to go there and enjoy it just as much as anyone else. So I think that's really important as well.
Thank you so much. Are there any other comments, questions, feedback? All right. Well, I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I hope this was somewhat useful and really do appreciate the passion and the feedback that you've provided here, because this is going to help us continue with our next steps and help shape the future of what that land is going to look like. So as our final activity before we go, if you choose to, please pick up a pack of Post-it notes from Sarah, and they are color coded from your least preferred option to your most preferred option. And you can go ahead and just stick those on the poster boards. The notes on the boards are exactly what was up here on the presentation, just a little bit of a summary of the key information we have right now about each of these options. And as Stacy said earlier, you are also free to take a pen and write a comment on the Post-it as well. And do please visit the online consultation website at connectpenatangwishing.ca. And that's where you can also vote online instead of here in person. Yep, 2 more people. You can do it again if you'd like. We're not going to prevent you from from doing it again. But if you've done it online, we've got your input there. So, yes. Technically, yes. So we're looking into ways to determine if there's several of the same IP addresses giving responses. But technically, yes, you could, if you're feeling passionate about it, vote more than once.
Thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, it is. So we just launched a brand new website. It is still www.penatangwishing.ca. But and it was happening to me too. So don't feel like you just didn't do something right. But what happens is it's called a cache or a cache. I don't know the way of pronouncing it, but basically your computer is automatically taking you to the old one. It doesn't understand. And so what you have to do is clear the cache, whatever it's called. And what that does, it takes all those, you hear about cookies and all those things, those are the things that your computer's remembering. But if you just were to type penatangwishing.ca and there was nothing else after it, it will bring you there. But I kept seeing mine would say penatangwishing.ca/index, And it's because it was bringing me to the old one. Hopefully that makes enough sense.
I also think if you go to just connect
penatangwishing.ca,
you should also be okay.
Yes, you just have to make sure there's nothing else after it and it will bring you there.
Okay.
Sorry, just in case there are future public consultations and surveys done again, a couple of good points were brought up in that perhaps you could ask to make sure, like, you've got to have some kind of signal that or response that the Penetang taxpayers are voting. And if you ask for the, postal code or something, I don't live in Penetang. I have 3 rental properties in Penetang. I pay my taxes here. So I think I'm qualified to be sitting in that chair tonight. Mm-hmm. But I think as far as the survey goes, you get an arena family or hockey family that votes 15 times. That's just not right.
Yeah.
So I think if it could be considered for any future online surveys to be a little bit more directed towards the Penetang taxpayers. Thank you.
So there's always a challenge with online surveys, getting as many people as you can to fill them out and making it as easy as possible. And then also, like you said, having some safeguards in place to ensure that sort of the right people are voting. That's why we try and do combinations of in-person and online things, but those are important points for sure. Thank you. One more question, I think. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, with respect to the last comments about the surveys and so on, I'm just curious in terms of the online survey and, the Post-it notes and these kinds of things. How much influence does that have with council in determining the direction that we move forward? And that goes right back to my initial comment at the beginning of the session. There's a huge difference between an online survey and having a referendum or a direct mail to every taxpayer, that to me, that sounds a lot more valid or a lot more binding. I really question what value do we have in putting some Post-it notes up, and how much influence does the survey results have?
So it's a piece of information that we'll provide to the council. So, you know, if 10,000 people filled out the survey, which I can tell you 10,000 people did not fill out the survey. But you know, if 200 people filled out the survey, then we'll tell council, well, we had 200 survey responses and these are what they are. So it's not to say that we'll present the results in a way that says, you know, 90% of the community feels this. It's really just about gathering information in this way at this time and presenting that information back to council. Yes. For sure. For sure. For sure. Okay. All right.